Good evening, everyone. We are here tonight for the Beacon of Light podcast. And tonight, I'm a little starstruck of who we have here, Miss Melanie Willard. Now, why I am is because she was one of the first people that left an impression on me at a conference that we attend in the fall. And there was just such, I would say, I'll say impact as well as inspiration in her message when I heard her give a speech about her story. And so I was so excited that she was able to come on and be a part of this, with this October month being Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And she is a thriver after domestic violence and victor, I would say, because of all of the things that she has been able to do. She's not stuck. She's not back there in that dark place over there. She's really pushing forward with so many things. And so it's like so cool, guys. I'm sorry. It's just, for me, it's just awesome. So I wanted to share a little bit about that. And I'm down here in Kyle, Texas, and it looks like we have some people popping on here, which is fantastic. So thank you, everybody. Hey, John, thanks for being here and giving such great support. Melanie, where are you tonight broadcasting from?
From Canada, Ontario, Canada.
Excellent. So Melanie's going to share a little bit about her story tonight, who she is, what she does, as well as some great supports and tips for anyone that might be struggling with domestic violence. And so, Melanie, we've got an important thing racing down here, and you'll see the name of her book as Dare to Be Raw. So this is something that's, she's got it right there. It's really powerful and impactful about what her story is, because it's true, and what she overcame to do what she does now is amazing. So Melanie, why don't you share a little bit about who you are, and then we will dive into this topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. And I know you're doing quite a difference as well in raising awareness, especially on this topic. And I think it's not something I wanted to focus on because it was just such a dark time for me. So I just appreciate your courage and being so brave to be willing, and just all the work and effort you're doing to raising awareness. I just want to say thank you on behalf of those who don't have a voice quite yet, and those of us who have gotten out. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So yeah, I'm from Canada, and the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing my own work as an author and a speaker. I started out the last 15, 20 years before that. I was in crisis intervention, disaster relief, and during that time, I experienced burnout, compassion fatigue. I've been through PTSD as well. And as a result, I have a real heart for all the helpers out there and the caregivers, first responders, because having worked with a lot of them over the course of my work, my heart goes out to them because of the result of what they do, and they end up paying for a lot of what they go through in their work. And so I just am passionate about helping them as much as possible, just overcome and let them realize that there is hope, and that they don't have to be stuck in that, but that they can thrive again in helping others. And so a lot of the speaking that I do is focused on helping professionals, first responders, any caregiver type of organization. I am passionate about equipping. And I also do a lot of faith-based work as well. But so that's kind of where my focus has been. And I'm always just open to sharing my story with any group, and anyone who's just looking for inspiration and just resilience, and just really explore the resilience of the human spirit. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. Wow, the power of really helping our first responders to heal so that they can continue to do. I know that's such a calling. It is a calling to be able to go out and want to help somebody who is in need, because showing up. There's energy that's happening there. There are sometimes trauma. There's sometimes weather related. Sometimes weapons are involved. Sometimes it's a terrible accident. The range of things are immense, but it harbors in trauma and a little bit of fear, right? Because they have to overcome that, go in and respond. They don't go in and like, why'd you leave the stove on? Way to go. You started the fire. You know,
Right.
they're right there to help support and get things going. And it takes a lot. I always hope and wonder if when they get back from, their shift, so to speak, right? The on-call, the duty time, do they have a time and a place to download, to vent, to process, so that they are fresh and ready to go back out there? And it sounds like a lot of your work helps in that refreshment, because we need them. We need them to be ready at a moment's notice, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, for the majority of them, I mean, the stigma is still so strong with regards to PTSD or compassion. People think, well, the minute I'm suffering, it's a sign of weakness. It means I'm not fit for the job. It means, I guess, people are going to have to let me go because I can't do this. And so because of that, I think a lot of people rather just stay quiet and suffer alone and in silence, which is what I did. And a lot of other responders that I had helped as well, who were, what happens is we start hanging out with people who are quote unquote equally as damaged as we are. And so we're just feeding each other's addictions or habits, and it becomes a bit of a joke. And I think the more we can start and open the conversation and have people share their real stories and how they overcame, and that there's nothing wrong with it. It's literally, a lot of PTSD is an injury to the brain. And the more we realize that, the more we're going to be compassionate towards the people who are hurting, instead of judging and looking at them as weak. So anyways, that's kind of a side note, but.
But I think it's really important to understand that the more aware that we are of anything, any topic, whether it be everything you shared, domestic violence, whatever, once we have that perspective shift, empathy, which is one of my favorite signs, it's from my heart to your understanding, and together we get it. That part starts to open up even more. And we no longer look at weakness. I love what Brene Brown says, is when you ask people about being vulnerable, they talk about all these strengths. And where in the world is that ever weakness? It's absolutely not weakness.
No, exactly.
And that is the openness that we can really, move forward. And so when we're thinking about that and thinking about the context of domestic violence, the strength that so many survivors have is that they know the next day what to do, how to get through. They know greatly how to survive. And that's not where we want them to stay. We want them to be able to get out and to have these conversations and share. So with your experience, with how you understood and got into a relationship that became violent, or it was violent from the start and feeling scared, trapped, how did it all work for you? What happened?
Well, I grew up in a very sheltered home. I had, gone through eating disorders, depression, suicide in my teens, but I had never been in a serious relationship, and I had never really experienced much of the world outside of my family and my community. So I was grew up quite sheltered and protected. And when I moved out west to be with this guy, Ben, he was the typical suave, just very charming guy, good looking. You just kind of get sucked into the whole thing. And I thought it was love at first sight. I thought, this is it. I finally met my match. But it was only 3 months later that, the red flags already started coming up, and he just starts, throwing me around and getting really jealous. And anyways, it was kind of like a bipolar. You never knew who was going to show up at home. And so after those 3 months, I just stayed there. And unfortunately, it only got progressively worse at that point. And the thing that I think what happens is because of the verbal abuse, because of the putting down so much, and you're reduced to a pulp. You don't even know who you are. You have zero confidence left. Self-esteem is already low when you get in there, or you wouldn't stay. And, you know, by the time they're done with you, there's not much left of you. And I think that's why it becomes so hard to leave. But I remember being on our first couple of dates, and Ben told me everything about his life and his upbringing. And I had never met someone who had suffered so much. He was abused as a kid, mentally, physically, sexually. He had been thrown from one, foster family to another. And so he just grew up totally messed up, and that's all he knew. And so it was very normal for him. And so after, a few months of being with him and just twisting things and conversations, or, just the insecurities that he had was so disturbing. You're not allowed to talk to your parents unless it's in English, because if I spoke French, they didn't understand. So he thought I was, coming up with a plan to leave or something, or talking ill of him. And I could not get any calls from friends. Any mail I got, he would just destroy before I got to open it. And, physically it was pretty bad as well. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people outside don't understand why we stay. And one of the reasons is because we are controlled. We are, made to feel like so little. And you just don't think that there's anything else out there. They kind of become the center of the universe. You are completely isolated. You have no friends. And you think, well, who else am I ever going to find in my life? Who else is ever going to love me? And so you feel stuck. And mentally, you feel like, what else is there to do? What other job am I ever going to do? And, they control every aspect of our being. They control the finances. A lot of times Ben just didn't even work. So there was no finances to manage. But any finances I did bring in, he would spend. And so, we've lived in apartments where there was not one piece of furniture. We lived out of car for months at a time. And there's just no escaping him. Like, we were together 24/7. And, I think it just gets to the point where there's nothing left of you. You feel like they own you. I don't know. It's a pretty weird feeling. And just right now with COVID, I think how my heart has just really gone out to the women, well, men too, but women right now, just because I keep thinking, well, how isolated I felt, how much worse must it be for them? They can't even leave the house right now, and to be with what I call someone who's demon possessed, because that's literally what it felt like. His face would literally just change from being normal. His eyes would go from being like, I don't know, like a gold-ish color to being black. And his whole countenance would just change, and he would become a different person. He would just become, I don't know, extremely violent. And there's been times where we had 3-4 police officers holding him back, and the only thing that would work is if they pepper sprayed him, and so it's just craziness. And I know there's all kinds of, and it's not to say that, well, if it's not physical, it's not there. And I know I'm kind of all over the place, but a lot of women are being abused, and even though it's not physical, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Verbal abuse is just as damaging to a person and to the children, and it's just important to know that we can't judge and we can't expect women to just pack up and leave, because the risk of them even being murdered like increases exponentially once they leave their partner. And so, you know, being told that you're good for nothing, and, you know, the words and vocabulary that these people can come up with, sometimes it makes me scratch my head. But you just have no confidence. You have no wheels. Like, you have no car. You have nothing, no independence whatsoever. So where are you going to go? With what money? With what bank account? With what? And where are you going to go? And so I think a lot of women just feel really helpless. They feel stuck. They feel like they're in a prison. They feel like, what other opportunities are there? And so you kind of just, every day is, you know, a day where all that is before you is, okay, am I going to survive today? Am I going to live through today? Because from, you know, it's like turning on a switch on and off. These people can just change. One word, one glance, one stare, you know, and the jealousy was, I don't know, there are no words to explain it. If I happened to look outside the window as we were driving, you know, I would risk, at one point he kicked me out of a moving van. I was left at a 7-Eleven for having smiled at the sumo wrestler size cashier. And he left me there for like a few hours, just sitting on the curb, you know, just random stuff where you get to a point where all you're doing is looking on the ground, because you don't want to happen to just lift your head and there be a human right there that you're accused of flirting with. And then you have to pay for it and get your butt whooped, right? So, yeah, you basically get to a point where everything, every move, every thought, every action is calculated on your part, because you don't know what's going to cause him to snap. And I just even think of being with Ben right now with COVID, like, to go into a store and be told to wear a mask, like, that's the kind of stuff he wouldn't even have put up with. He would have just, like, you know, either gotten in a fight or just snapped on the cashier or something. And I just, my heart goes out to people right now, because it can't be easy. Just even going back there and talking about it, like, my chest is pretty tight. And it's been like 25 years since then. So just goes to show that watching different movies can trigger me, which don't always make sense. Like, if there's any violence toward a woman, obviously, but different screams that I'll hear, even if it's not related to domestic violence, or, strangely enough, the anticipation of something going wrong, of something happening. If I watch war movies, which I do enjoy, but if I watch those and there's scenes with, like, fields with landmines, I get triggered, and I get a lot of anxiety, because it's the not knowing when something's going to blow up, or when a car is going to blow up. And that, just talking about it right now, it's bizarre how our brain is wired. And, you know, the whole thing with PTSD is our brain's incapable of telling us that the threat has passed. But I know the threat has passed. Ben has since, you know, taken his life in 2009. And, but my body knows the threat's passed, my heart knows, but my brain somehow has a hard time believing it. So it's one of those things that, even though I'm, you know, so much better and I've overcome so much of the trauma from all of that, you know, there's just little triggers, little things that'll just kind of, oh, here we go again, or whatever. So yeah, it's different. And I think that the thing with the triggers is to also know, like, when I wrote my book, when I found out that Ben was dead, I actually phoned, which is like in British Columbia, the other end of the country. I phoned the funeral homes in town, in Kamloops, to confirm that he was legitimately dead. I didn't even believe it. I thought, maybe this guy's crazy enough. He could have, faked his own suicide. So I needed to have that confirmation before I actually went through to write the book, because I would not let anything past him.
That's very, very powerful. So many people have written about. Thank you for being so transparent. They've talked about the triggers. This is it. This is one of those sobering nights of what domestic violence does. It leaves things with us. Yet we see how accomplished Melanie is, what she's able to do now, what her heart and who it's for. She has the safety of knowing that he can never be there physically, mentally, spiritually again. Yet, like she says, she has to have these conversations with her brain to be, remember, it's done. The body's like, yeah, girl, let's give it up. Let's go. We're good.
Right.
But it's tough. And I just want you to know that her coming on here, being so vulnerable and sharing this, it is a challenge for many. But Melanie, what helped this change? What started once you finally left? What is the story from there? Like, what happened?
Well, I actually want to get to the point where I had my aha moment, and there's two things I want to share, and the one is the aha moment. For me, we were apart. He had kind of left, but I had sort of left, but it was mostly him who had left for somebody else. And to make a long story short, that night I was sleeping. I was living with 3 other people. It was a huge house. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, he woke me up. He just broke into the room, woke me up, and just started causing a complete ruckus. He destroyed every single thing I owned, every single piece of clothing. He actually made me hide in a little cubicle in the corner of the room and just lost it. Like, that guy with the black eyes, colored eyes, just showed up. And after he was done that, he kind of ripped my clothes off, and he was being violent. And he started urinating all over me and all over the floor. And I always thought of it kind of like a dog claiming his territory, right? Just, it was the most animalistic thing ever. And then decided that, it was time for him to just get sexual. And so it wasn't until I saw a psychotherapist months later that I was told that anybody who would do that, especially when you're, knocked out, unconscious, that anyone who would do that is considered psychotic. And I don't have any doubt in me that he was. I don't even know where I was going. So the aha moment was when all of this happened, and he looked at me and said, when we have kids, this is how I'm going to show them love, because this is all I know love to be. And I remember in that moment, I thought, that's it. It's over. I'm done. And because you can beat me up, you can do whatever you want to me, because I don't love myself. And this is why a lot of us stay. We don't think we deserve better. But you're not going to touch my kids. And so that was kind of like my aha moment. But even that night after that had happened, I remember laying there. He was passed out beside me because he was completely drunk, or I don't know what he was on that night. And I was so gripped with fear that I lay there naked, just wishing I could scream, wishing I could run to the rooms upstairs, because I was on the main floor. They all lived upstairs. And I couldn't. I remember I stared at the door for hours. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm staring at the door, and my body, it was like there was a weight on my body holding it down. Like, it was like I was just handcuffed to the floor, and I couldn't move. I was just completely frozen in fear. And so, people wonder, why don't you leave? Well, you can't let anything pass these people. I mean, he was ready to drive his truck through my pastor's house, when he found out I lived there. And that night it took 4 officers to get a hold of him. And so that was the aha moment. And the most amazing thing is, not long after that, I finally left him. And this is where God I had just kind of started a relationship with God months before. And this is a pretty cool story, I think. But he had taken me, I don't know, for a drive in the mountains. We were in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know, I think you understand my level of fear of Ben. But it's not till we got to the place where we were at that I told him it was over, that I told him everything he had done to me. And while I was talking to him, I remember God was so real in the truck. And I remember, I kind of grew up in church, and to me, God was in the church. It wasn't like God was everywhere I was. It was just, you go to church to meet with God, but I felt his presence. Like I could feel his nearness and this overwhelming sense of peace. Like I was safe. It was just the coolest feeling in the world. And I felt like this guy can't touch me. And I just had a confidence and a boldness that I never experienced until that day with Ben. And I told him, and it was over, and he was actually crying, which I never saw happen either. And I think I don't remember seeing him cry before that ever. So that's kind of how that happened. And which was such a miracle, like, to say the least. And so from that point on, it was maybe a month after that it was completely over. I never saw him again. I saw him once, but he didn't see me. We just kind of crossed on the road. But after that, it wasn't like rose, it wasn't a walk in the park. I had a lot of PTSD I had to deal with. I dealt with a lot of my PTSD through bulimia, actually, and anorexia, through eating. And it took a while to get over that, years actually, but it did come. And through a lot of prayer and counseling, and just friends and people I could go to and talk with, and I made it through it. And so this was when I was, early 20s. And since then, that's where my life went. After that, I just got into missionary work and worked with some shelters and all kinds of different things. So yeah, it's amazing where God can take it. And, I think a lot of times people don't know what to do, or I don't ever recommend people to say, hey, just leave where you're at, or just leave your spouse just like that, because it's not that easy. You definitely need a plan. The way it happened for me was a God thing. The way it happened for me was God intervened and took care of it, and somehow allowed him to be done and leave me alone and not stalk me, or worse, So just do not think of just leaving. Call your local shelter. All of them have, processes and plans in place to help women leave safely. And it's not an overnight thing where you pack your bags and go. It's a week, it's weeks and months that it can take. And it's worth it, and you can do it. And there is hope. There is another side to this story. There is another second part of your life, another, chapter, if you want to embrace it and believe it's there, because it is. And it's just a matter of you finding the help and the support that you need to do it. And it's worth it. You're worth it. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The part about making a plan is so important. I found myself in my situation making a plan about 18 months prior to leaving. And I've shared this part. I really never actually called it a plan, like, I'm going to leave, here's my plan.
Yeah.
But it was the process of it, because connections through God were given, ways and experiences where the isolation started to narrow. Yes. And I was able to make some contacts. And in the situation where I had to use his mental illness against him to benefit our story, I joined part of his mental story so that we could escape. And it was part of that. The awareness of actually leaving really sobered up quickly. about 4 months prior to going. And that's when a lot of action had taken place. And I think about and reflect on that overall 18 months. And probably those first 12 months was me untying, unknitting, loosening each emotional string that I had connected, right? Because trauma bonds happen.
Right.
And it took me a long time to untie that. That's nothing that you can just sever with a sword. You have to untie each one. Yeah. So it takes the time. But Melanie, you're absolutely right. There are places, there are advocates, there are shelters in many, many areas. And we are here to encourage that you matter, you are worth it. And don't let anyone ever tell you that you're not, and have that oppression and
that's right.
Feeling trapped. I mean, because look what Melanie does now. She acts as such a great support to those first responders who are many of the times that arrive. Unfortunately, in a lot of time, it is a domestic violence situation. And she is there to help and support them and teach them to know how to understand it's not weakness, it's strength. And how they can heal and keep going in this calling that they have, and how she took those experiences and how God strengthened her to now be able to share with so many more. And it's possible that the depths of that weakness you felt have now become your greatest strengths, because you know that opposition. You know how that feels, and you never want to go there again. And so that's really protective. It's an interesting, way that it all circles back around. So I really thank you, Melanie, for sharing those pieces with us. So what people have said is, trying to write that new chapter, this is a God thing. This is the way that we put things. It really, really is a God thing. It is very sobering. So many people here are answering, understanding, and feeling this tonight. So thank you, Melanie, for sharing. And with that, would you like to kind of leave us something with kind of those last words? Maybe show your book, and we'll put the book and the opportunity to be able to get it down below, because this is something that is transformational. So go ahead and hold that up there and share some of your final words with us tonight.
Right. Well, first of all, there's always hope. We think it feels like the bottom of the darkest abyss in the world, right? You think you're alone, it's cold, and nobody can hear you. But it's a matter of taking that one step of faith, just having that one conversation with a friend and saying, hey, this isn't good, and for them to keep it confidential and just to be that support. It's so critical and so key to have someone to talk to. But for all of us out here who don't realize the extent to which people are suffering under that kind of abuse, whether mild or however mild or severe, I think it's important to realize that there are no words to the value and power that your presence has in the lives of those who are suffering, the lives of those victims. Because at the end of the day, we are all in need of love and compassion. We need safety, and just being a presence there, being a go-to person is so important. And for all of those of you out there who offer the support, whether you're a shelter worker, frontline staff, hospital staff, first responders, again, I want to encourage you as well to not allow compassion fatigue to creep in, because what happens is, I think, and I'll just share a very quick story. I was at a coffee shop, and my nose was all busted in a cast, and officers would come and have coffee and their donut. I'm kidding. At this coffee shop, and a lot of them would just say hi and whatnot, and didn't really get to know too many of the officers. But this one guy would come and he would call me by name and say, hey, Melanie, how are you doing? And he just kind of treated me like a person, a human being. And he was actually the one working on my case after being in the hospital and the court. And he came up to me after all the other guys would just come and my cast is there. And he says, you know, how are you doing? How are you really doing? You know, and it's just taking that extra moment to hold somebody's hand or just care, to make them feel like they matter, like they're seen, is just don't underestimate the power of your presence and just going the little extra mile. Because I know a lot of you probably think, oh, she's just, you know, it's like you got it written on your forehead, domestic case, and this girl's going to leave this guy just to go with another and another, because that's what women do, is they just go from one abuser to the other. But you never know. I wish this guy Mark, this Constable Mark from Canmore, I don't know where he is, but I wish he would know that he marked me to the point where I'm talking about him 25 years later, 20 years later. So it just goes to say that if you're one of those people who are helping, don't give up, and just don't look at a person as a number or another case. Just look at that human suffering behind whatever the situation is. So
amazing. Thank you. All of you out there who are those supporters. We are those people that need your support. And when you can share the story, just like Melanie did with Mark and how he treated her as, how are you? I see you. I notice you. I want to be involved. Simple things that mean so much. We are built to connect and we are built to belong. And that is, you know, that's very powerful. It's what helps us to make life beautiful. So thank you, Mark, wherever you are out there. Thank you. Melanie, thank you so much. And everyone who has showed up here tonight, we hope that you have felt something, maybe thought about something. And again, we'll put the links down below for Melanie's book, for our supporters toolkit, for anyone out there that would like to become a supporter for someone. And thank you again so much, Melanie.
Thank you for doing this, April.
Welcome. You're welcome. We'll see you all. Bye, everybody.